And we're back. One of the few Democratic voices that came out against Amendment 66 is Senator Bob Hagedorn, former state senator. Also, he's launching a new and I think pretty important project. Bob, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Before we jump into the issue that's coming fast and furious next year on legalizing recreational pot, you were one of the few vocal Democrats that stood up and said 66 is not a good idea, this massive tax increase. You got a lot of crap for that. I mean, it was hard to stand up as one of the few Democrats, but when the results came in, it seemed like a lot of Democrats voted against it as well. What's the behind-the-scenes story?
Yeah, I kind of thought that, I did take a lot of crap from some Democrats, but as it was getting closer and closer to, getting your ballot into the mail, I started getting messages from Democrats, including retired teachers that have been very active in the teachers union, registered Democrats, saying that, this whole thing is BS, what they're saying. The money's not going to get into the classroom, and, I'm glad you're standing up and speaking out. So, yeah, I mean,
and to be clear, you and I have some policy differences. You're not against a tax increase for education. You're against this tax increase for education.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the first time in my life that I ever voted against a tax increase.
Feels good, doesn't it? Feels good. Come to the dark side. It only gets better, let me tell you. The next hit is going to feel even better. First one's free.
Oh, yeah. But this was it was $1 billion, which is just amount of money it's hard to get a handle on, and particularly it's like. Isn't anybody reading the newspaper? Is that, the economy is not doing all that well. Why are we doing this? And why, is it, the impact on small businesses besides, individuals? So it was really, to me at least, it was a perfect storm not to support it.
Well, but it's still, there's a code among parties. You don't speak ill of your own party. And you stood up and said this was a bad thing. And I knew you took a lot of heat for it. So thank you for doing that. It's not an easy thing to do. Starting next year, we have legal recreational sales of marijuana. This concerns you quite a bit. Now, we have drunk driving laws. The drunk driving laws say if you have this blood alcohol content level, you can't drive. If you do, there's some serious consequences. And we just passed something, did we not, that does the same thing for marijuana use, that measures THC in your system if you get pulled over for driving. Do I have that, Mark?
Yes, it's a 5 nanogram limit per milliliter of blood.
Okay.
And the real challenge to this is that THC basically comes in two forms, active and inert. I mean, when you...
And the active stuff is the fun stuff, I'm assuming.
Right, that's the fun stuff, and it doesn't last that long, just a few hours. But the THC metabolites, which are the end product of the metabolism that goes on when you put a match to your bong or, when you light your joint up or whatever the case.
Whatever you do. Why are you looking at me like that? Let me tell you my whole pot history. Tried it, made me cough, went back to scotch. Yeah. Anyway.
Didn't someone else just said that they just tried it and didn't like it?
It just doesn't seem like an enjoyable drug.
You and Bill Clinton have a lot in common,
No,
John.
no. He didn't inhale. I tried to inhale.
Okay.
Let me make it very clear.
I'm glad you made that clear for us. But the issue being is that you can separate whether it's in active form or whether it's a metabolite form.
In other words,
but it's expensive to be able to do that kind of testing.
So if a cop pulls somebody over who he thinks is high, there is a test that they can take for that. It's expensive, but there also leaves a trail in your bloodstream for weeks, doesn't it? Well, even though you're no longer stoned, you can tell if somebody's been using pot. You just can't tell if they've been inebriated.
Right. It's the THC metabolites that linger in the fatty tissues of your body, and which will show up.
Okay.
And but I mean, there is. Even the federal government acknowledges that the effects of marijuana dissipates in 5 hours, which is a little high, but they're being on the safe side.
All right, what is your interest here? You're launching a new educational project here for something I was completely unaware of, and I want to get this. We've come so far on drinking and driving. I mean, and culturally. If this was 20 years ago, you sit around and you talk about stories you had when you were drunk and still made it home. You can't do that today because people will rightfully look at you like you're an idiot and how dare you do it. It is now wrong to do so. We're going to have the same problems with marijuana, but we're trying to figure out those limits, so it seems like we're going in the right direction. What's the issue?
There's, I think, something very promising is that Sweden has developed a breathalyzer test, and that will actually, it can, from the testing that's been done on it, is that it can actually determine if a person is under the influence of THC. It separates out the two forms of THC, as I mentioned, and that needs to be, I think, pushed through very quickly for the testing and to be able to get that on the streets. But I mean, it does need to be, you know, researched more. But there is a device out there that would make law enforcement a lot easier for this, and it gets rid of from the you know, the fact that you may have this lingering
Right.
THC in your body. And this is one of the challenges as we, you know, are looking at how big of a problem is this going to be. And because, you know, we have old records that have been kept over the years, people that have been stopped for drunk driving, they've done blood tests, and they show that there's presence of drugs. And all they knew is that THC. They don't know whether the person was high at the time or whether they had smoked a day before, a week before, or even a month before.
But as a lawmaker, you've seen those laws. We have laws that say you can't drink and drive, but we also have laws saying you can't drive under the influence of other mind-altering drugs,
Right.
can't we? But it's hard to measure.
It's hard to measure, and this is the state of Washington, which, by the way, has seen a rise in drug driving or stone driving since January 1st. And Washington keeps their data different than the state of Colorado has, but they definitely have shown an increase in stone driving since it became legal. And you know, we are going to have to, you know, figure out a way. I mean, I certainly have no objections to people saying, you know, and I would agree with them that marijuana is safer than alcohol, but that does not mean that marijuana is safe. And particularly the biggest danger is when people use both at the same time, the co-occurring use. That
The what use?
Co-occurring.
Co-occurring use.
Yes.
All right, now this is something you brought to me and said people need to know about this, and I never even thought about this. Explain this, because basically we've got laws for people who drink. We're trying to structure laws for people who use marijuana. We have no laws for people who are doing both. Is that the problem?
Here's the issue is that there's research out there, and one of them includes a government study. The best one of all, I think, was from BMJ, used to be the British Medical Journal. And it suggested in its conclusion of its study, and this is a valid scientific medical study, that you could be below legal limits for THC and be below the legal limits for alcohol in your system, but still be really screwed up. And one study suggested that the equivalent is a 0.14 BAC. Under state law now, 0.15 blood alcohol concentration is excessive. So, I mean,
let me kick this back to you, see if I'm catching this right. So somebody could be drinking and smoking pot at the same time, get into the car, get pulled over because he's not driving well, get a blood test or some other test, and accurately measure his blood alcohol content level. It's below 0.08. Get his THC level, it's actually below the legal limit. But when you add how these two things affect each other, it's as if he has a blood alcohol content level of nearly 1.5, almost double the legal limit
Right.
to drive. But the man is still legal to drive under the current laws we have, because this is not a problem we've figured out how to measure or even really thought about. I never thought about this.
And that very serious, you know, problem. I mean, very much a potential issue. And the fact is that, of course, everybody reacts a little bit different and whatnot. But literally is that people co-occur, use marijuana and alcohol, they can find themselves really screwed up and not be breaking the law as such.
In other words, and they can get on the roads and they can kill somebody.
Exactly.
Drinking and driving, rightfully, is seen as such a disgusting, awful thing to do. And I've got to credit organizations like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, even though I don't agree with their techniques going state to state and changing laws, but they've done a wonderful job in changing the psychology of Americans that you don't do that it's acceptable to have that DD, the designated driver, when you go out. That's the way you do it. There's one guy who doesn't drink. But now this is a whole different world. We're going to have to get used to really quickly. People could die before we figure this out. So you've got a couple ideas, including educating people, and also you want to work with the legislature. Talk about what you want to get done.
Well, I think that, significantly what we need to do is be able to change how we collect data regarding drug driving, so that we can start breaking out how many people are on the roads with THC in their system, marijuana, and not, cocaine, meth, and prescription drugs, et cetera. So as much as anything else, I think that we have to have research. We know very little American research has done.
But isn't that one of the great things about having decriminalized marijuana here, is now we can actually start doing research on something that's legal, because before it's all been underground and really hard to measure, unlike booze and tobacco and other things where you can have studies.
Yeah, question is that will the University of Colorado research cannabis and THC, because they get so much money in federal grants? And is this going to be a conflict? Are they going to be worried about, still violating federal law? Although the Department of Justice has said, it's okay as long as you don't do, these 8 things.
But enough to scare you away from doing it.
But we really, this is something I think that the legislature should look at, is, encouraging. We need it. We don't know what the long-term effects of marijuana is and are. And the only way we can find that is by studying it. And
you're not trying to repeal the marijuana law, are you?
I'm very supportive of Amendment 66. And
64.
Right. I'm sorry, we were talking about Amendment 66 a minute ago. But very supportive. And
whether you're supportive or not, the reality is it's here and it's going to be here for a while.
Well, that's my point. Is that as I talk to other folks, that I don't deny that I was very supportive of Amendment 64. Is that the issue is that okay, that's history. Now let's try to sit there and make this work and make it as safe as possible. And gosh, here's a totally outrageous idea, John. Let's be proactive. Let's not wait until we have problems. Let's be able to anticipate the problems, and as we move forward, start educating people about the dangers of, if you're going to get high, you're going to get drink, hey, stay home and enjoy the high.
We've got less than a half a minute here. Let me ask you, what is the message going out? Because not only is this a message to the legislators, this is also to people who smoke and drink. What's the message to them?
The message is, is that when you smoke, wait a few hours after you've stopped smoking before you drive. And my personal thing is that if you're drinking alcohol and smoking pot, don't ever, stay home definitely and enjoy the buzz.
Enjoy the buzz. Senator, thank you. Thank you. Check out the Independence Institute, independenceinstitute.org. Listen for me on KHOW Radio. Tell a friend. We'll see you next week.